So how can we sort out this grave suffering that we see all over the world, really? Whether it's physical or mental, depression, anxiety. I wonder what the suicide rate is these days. Well, I know that it definitely went up throughout the year 2020, 2021. Um, but generally, it's the anxiety, isn't it? It's the depression. It's this general low mood of almost dread. I don't know whether you feel this as well. It's like if you're having to work constantly your whole life with something that perhaps you do like, but in your own terms, it's like, well, I want to work on this day, but I don't really want to work 5 days a week. That's too much because then it becomes sort of like a burden, really, that you don't want to bear. And why is this really the case? When we look at the tube stations in London or New York City or wherever really in the world, you can just see these huge swarms, these huge hordes of people that are all just getting flung around, going to A to B, A to B, A to B. Every day it's like this huge breathing organism, isn't it? These capital cities of people moving in, out, in, out. And that movement pattern, I would suggest, is absolutely nothing that would look like freedom. Because it would look more like, if you think of it as a sort of heat map, that would be more like the weekend, right? When people are actually free to, you want to go there, you want to do this. But then we get so accustomed to this social model that we have to basically pay to be alive, right? Pay to survive. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't have to pay to be alive. And at New Earth Land, that is really about creating this foundation for everyone in society that offers shelter, energy, food and water as basic securities that we can all come together and participate in, reclaiming our land and designing the co-housing that can actually make this a reality. But it can only happen when we come together. And so, when we think about it, it's like, okay, why is everyone suffering? It's because something's wrong. And that is that we are ultimately enslaved. We are rent slaves on this planet, which sounds like a very harsh, sort of difficult pill to swallow. But that is the reality, isn't it? We're ultimately enslaved for the basic things that we need to exist, which are shelter, energy, food and water. The things that our actual bodies need. Why would we ever, if we could come together in a true democracy, which we can right now, on social media, if we could agree globally that it shouldn't be this way, then that is the way it would be. That's the way it would become, right? And it's not about overhauling the social model. It's about simply offering a social foundation, a structure beneath it that allows us to flourish, that allows us to thrive instead of just merely survive, paying the bills, paying thousands of pounds every month. It's like we spend all our time earning the money, and at the end of the month, we just give it away again because we have to, you have to stay warm at night. No one wants to be homeless. No one wants to be out on the street. But I can see why more and more people are actually choosing that because it's becoming more and more ridiculous with this house, the cost of living crisis, and just it's so unaffordable, like housing. So how much would we actually, if we could come together, and this sounds like complete sort of blue sky thinking, but if we could all come together, how much would we actually agree that we should be paying for these basic things? Because I would say it's actually nothing, right? Why would we do that? Like, we are the people of this earth. We are just spinning around a little rock in space. We can ultimately do whatever we want to do within reason, within the law, okay? But that is, of course, the intention is to actually improve our social conditions, improve our mindsets, remove a lot of crime which happens as a result of scarcity, There's no need for us to be in this scarce condition anymore. Really, the battle is between abundance and scarcity. There are no political ideologies required for us to actually live in a paradise, in a utopia of sorts. And of course, this is where they're trying to direct us, but it's coming to us by way of the government. And it's a provision that's going to be required for us because why? They create a condition of scarcity and then they provide the abundance from a controlled means. So like there'll be no farmland left owned by individuals. It will all be state owned. And there will be no housing either. This is where Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum is coming from. You will own nothing and you will be happy. And there's a sad reality to it because if we are reduced in consciousness to such an extent, then those beings will indeed be happy because they won't be able to see beyond the chains of their prison cells. They won't be able to see beyond the walls of a social model that they were born into. And therefore they cannot see or imagine or conceive of another way of living. But the simplicity of the solution is there for anyone with eyes to see, which is that if we can come together and actually create a true democracy that doesn't depend on these frankly corrupt and moronic politicians, then we will begin to manifest the ideals and dreams and visions that we see fit. And it doesn't need to be this kind of like crazy, huge overhaul, of anything. It can be something that simply runs in parallel, in conjunction with the society we've already got. It's just about affording a little bit more balance. At the moment, everything is ultimately a commodity. But what I'm saying is that we should decommodify shelter, energy, food and water, the basic things we need to exist, so that we can afford a socialist foundation upon which this system, this tokenized system that we have of capitalism, can actually operate more effectively, and people will have much more freedom of choice in their life. People are still going to continue working. People, just as the way things are operating now, it's just that at the end of the month, you're not going to be giving away a huge percentage of your income to some greedy landlord or to some property developer, because that's where the enslavement is. We're ultimately enslaved to property developers, and we're enslaved to those who have, perhaps through inheritance, got ahead of the curve. And this is where some of the Karl Marx statements make sense. I'm no communist. I'm no socialist even, really. I don't really subscribe to the political spectrum, but social inequality and economic disparity are congenital diseases of capitalism, and that polarization, that division, will continue and amplify over time. It's just more of like a factual, scientific conclusion to the social model that we have. And so, we live in a meritocracy, but that merit shouldn't be based on anything to do with our fundamental physiological needs, which surely, we need to be the ones that now to come together and realize that this is what the government should have been doing all along, but never will. And that is to provide people, beings, babies, newborn babies, the new generation in this world. Surely we can all come together and agree that there's no need for us to charge ourselves for such simple provisions. Because that is exactly how we'd operate if we all met each other on a desert island right now. Okay, this is how society would develop. But of course, if someone gets control of those resources, then it becomes a psychological affair of it's me, I want power. And this is where we get stimulated on the lower faculties, the lower desires of being a human being. But this is why I'm always talking about the expansion of awareness and expansion of consciousness, because once we can overcome that and sort of evolve from these more primitive states of being, which is all me, and that's very much how we've been educated. The whole process, when you think of it, is how did you do at school today? How did you do? Then you get the exams, and then you pass, and then you're always being pitched off against one another. And then you're in the rat race where it's all about the individual. It's not that all of that needs to be discarded. It's just that there needs to be a balancing principle at play, which is that beneath all of that is this shared provision that we all have, and the abundance everywhere will just render a lot of these political ideologies obsolete, because it's uncontrollable. Anyone that's had any awareness of the ills and insanity of communism will see how that is fundamentally flawed. But it was never based on abundance. It was always scarcity. It was always ownership from state control. Whereas if everything is everywhere, it's like if you've got housing everywhere that's providing hydroponic systems and providing the shelter for people who can participate in these projects through application. To begin with, this would be a transient occupation, of course, because not everyone's going to be able to experience these projects, but there'll be a snowball effect. There'll be more and more and more of them. And, industrial wise, we can produce bioplastics. We can overcome a lot of this oil and plastic pollution that we're experiencing in the world. We've got the technologies in place. It's just that we're living in an antiquated system. It hasn't been updated. It's like we need to update the drivers of the society, and we are the people that have to actually drive that forwards. But there's not really, a way I can explain and communicate all of these things in a single video, 10 minutes long. But you can check out this in far more detail at newearth.land, which I'd encourage and invite people to do. Because like I say, this isn't a new social model whatsoever. It's just simply a support structure that we all would benefit from completely. People will be able to live their lives more freely. People will be able to work on the project they want to work. They'll have a lot more freedom of choice where to work, why to work, what they're doing, and following their passions and hobbies, people will express themselves more freely and more easily. They'll have more money and will have more time. It all just makes complete sense, and I'm amazed that this is not happening, but I understand why it is, because we're living in the matrix and people's consciousness has been constricted to the point where they can't see any possibilities emerging. They can't even conceive of another way of living. And, I just think we should come together to raise awareness now of the fact that we can. And we are the people, we are the power, we are the 99%. So let's come together and let's participate in the change that we want to see in the world. Thanks for watching.